Good afternoon. I want to call our workshop meeting to order. This is a special called and duly noticed workshop meeting for the Morganton City Council for the purpose of hearing about our automated metering infrastructure that we've been talking about several months. After this presentation from the gentleman who's going to be introduced in a little bit, if time permits, he will then take questions from the members of the public. But the first obligation is for our city council members to ask the specialist any questions that they have. This is not a public comment time. That will be later with the city council as usual at 5:30 p.m. But have your set questions ready, and hopefully if our questions don't take up the entire time, you'll be able to ask them then, or either Mr. Mara will be available for a few minutes after our workshop meeting. I'm going to call on the Chief Operating Officer of Electric Cities, Roy Jones, to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. Thank you for having us here this afternoon. I want to introduce Kevin Mara. He's the Vice President of GDS Associates. GDS was formed in 1986, and they're a consulting and engineering firm with a broad range of expertise in utilities including electric, natural gas, water, and wastewater utilities. A little bit about Mr. Mara. He has over 32 years of experience in power system engineering. While at GDS, Mr. Mara has advised several client utilities in engineering, budgeting, and the implementation of smart grid technology solutions. Mr. Mara has also provided expert testimony on behalf of large electric utilities in numerous cases brought before federal court, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and various state utility commissions. Mr. Mara has co-authored and authored numerous technical publications on electric power systems and technologies. Prior to joining GDS, he worked for Savannah Electric and Southern Engineering Company in the distribution engineering and project management. Mr. Mara holds a Bachelor of Science degree in electrical engineering from Georgia Institute of Technology and is a registered professional engineer in 19 states, including North Carolina. Mr. Mara.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Appreciate the invitation and the introduction to come talk to you this afternoon about advanced meter information and the pilot program that you guys are currently investigating at this time. I'm based out of Atlanta. I'm a professional engineer. A lot of experience in the utility business, working as a consultant for electric utilities in South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Alaska, and down in Florida. So a lot of different areas. Our company focuses mainly on electric utilities, looking at retail rate design, wholesale power, design of infrastructure from substations to pole lines to putting meters in. So we have a wide range of utility experience and working for utilities, but we also represent from time to time public advocacy groups. I do work for the Office of People's Counsel in the District of Columbia. We represent, that council represents the consumers against the investor-owned. We looked at AMI technology there, and I provided expert testimony on that case and the meters that they're rolling out in that area. And we also work directly for public utility commissions. We worked for the Public Service Commission in Georgia. We review Georgia Power's rate filings. So we don't just work for utilities, we also work on the other side and provide really a unbiased view of things that we see in the utility business for our clients. This project in Morganton, just to be on the record, GDS Associates is not involved with this. I got a call 2 weeks ago and asked if I could come talk about this subject. So, you know, whether this project goes or doesn't go, as from my firm's perspective, doesn't really matter. But I'm just here to share information about it and answer questions in as unbiased a situation as I can. So You guys are looking at upgrading your meters, which are manually read meters today, to an automated system. You've got approximately 100 meters in a pilot program today. Those meters were put out, I believe, around in December. The plan is to do a 6-month pilot and see how that technology is doing, and then be able to evaluate how it did in successfully reading the information and bringing it back. So far, the communication systems are working properly. As with any pilot, there's a few little hiccups on the new system, and those are being worked out. But the technology appears to be correct for here. So once this pilot program's done, I understand the plan is to then evaluate and then look at rollout. So again, just here to provide information about the technology itself, and not specifically about this particular project. So what is AMI? We hear about AMI and we hear about AMR. AMR was the early version of it, which was automated meter reading, and that's what we normally think about first is, gee, you put this meter on the house or the water meter and you can read it electronically, you don't have to go to it. And that was the first version. The newest version is the advanced meter infrastructure. With this, it's a two-way communication. I can get more data from the meter as opposed to just how much did it use last month. And this additional information is important for managing the grid, being able to see more things. For example, like on a water meter, you're going to be able to see that there's a leak, that there's more water going out than there historically has been. If you only read it automatically once every other month, you've got nothing more than saving a little bit of labor. Now you have a tool that you can use to proactively fix a problem. So you save labor with AMI because you don't have to go out and read them. The other labor piece is when people move in and out of an apartment, you don't have to go read the meter, disconnect it when one guy leaves, go back and do it again. You can do all of that remotely. It saves, again, quite a bit of money on service calls. Outage detection. When the meter sees the power go away, voltage goes out, lights go dark, the meter sends out a last gasp that says, hey, I'm out of power. And so if I get a signal from a whole bunch of meters from one neighborhood, but not this neighborhood over here, then I'm able to roll trucks out right to where the problem is, and I can restore power faster. So it helps from outage management, and it also helps in planning when there is an outage. How long is it going to take? And we can communicate to the public more information about restoration times. Is it going to be 2 hours or is it going to be 2 days? That kind of information becomes available when you have these systems in place. Having daily billing information. Oftentimes utilities have calls from the public saying, why is my bill high? I don't remember using this much electricity. Having daily billing consumption and be able to show them that kind of information helps to alleviate some of the concerns with the billing, as well as management of the grid. If someone wants to put a solar panel on their house and they're trying to size how big of a solar panel, what the right size is, having the daily consumption is an important part of trying to figure that out, both from the customer standpoint and the utility standpoint. So the management of the grid is an important aspect. Voltage monitoring is another one, is another big benefit. The city right now regulates the voltage. If you can turn the voltage down, you save on energy. But you have to be careful not to turn it down too far. By having meters that will send you back information about the voltage, you can make sure you don't turn it down too far, and you might even have more capacity to turn down further than you have been because you haven't been able to have this information. So these are all benefits that come from having AMI, just more than just the reading aspect of the monthly values of the meters. Currently in the United States, there's 43 million AMI meters in service. That doesn't count the older AMR technology that's already out there. So these are the newer versions, the AMI. So 33% of the households in America have an AMI meter on them today. So what you're engaging isn't cutting edge, super new. It's something that's around and pretty prevalent already within our society. As part of the American Recovery Act, one aspect of that act was this smart grid investment grant. And it was, again, looked at by the administration, what can we do to move things along, and bringing the grid forward by making it more automated, having more information was one of those projects. So with that smart grid investment grant, 15 million meters were installed in the country. It was a huge cost, was $4 billion. That wasn't all grant money. A lot of that money was paid for by utilities, but it was offset somewhat by this grant. And there was 81 different utilities that participated in that. So very, very much nationwide, and again, something that was pushed through by the federal government. This graph shows the deployment of AMI meters over time. Technology just becoming really available 2005, 2006, and you see an increase from 2007 to 2012 where I had data available that shows the deployment. And then you see it in 2012, it's up to $43 million. A big part of that increase that you see on that graph was that smart grid grant I just talked about. But you can see that it's gaining momentum in its use and deployment with utility systems across the United States. So some of the benefits that you get from having AMI meters, improved meter reading accuracy. Typically when you physically read a meter, you send a man out there to read the dials, it's common to see a 2% error rate, okay, where I've got to read the number, key it in, bring it back someplace, and then key it in again. There's chances for errors there. Often they're rectified in the next month. But with AMI, there's no error. It pretty much takes care of itself. It's either communicating or it's not. And when it's not communicating, you get a signal and you go out and you fix it. So you don't have those errors that you had previously. Faster response to outages. The meter's calling me when there is an outage. I can roll the truck directly to it when that occurs, and I can also get information locally about where that outage occurs. There'll be more options for bill paying, either pre-bill, you can prepay is an option that comes with that. You can have a remote disconnect. You can do different types of rate structures where they can be time of use. So you pay a high cost at peak times, but a low cost at off-peak times. And if you can modify, run the dishwasher late at night as opposed to in the evening, then you get a reduction. But those are options that you have with AMI that you don't have with a standard manual read system. Customers will be able to see how much they're using daily, and they'll also be able to see how much they're using right now. So it's, those are options that these devices would have available to consumers to be able to see what they're doing and how their usage therefore impacts their electric bill. Helps deter theft, right? If my neighbor's stealing power from the utility, someone has to make that up, and it's probably going to be me on my power bill. So it's good for the entire community to make sure that we can thwart that type of theft. When someone unplugs a meter to do nefarious things, it's sending a signal. So there's a lot of theft detection. So theft goes way down when you have an AMI system as well. The enhanced communication helps to manage the system as well. Again, we talked about turning the voltage down as one of the ways that we can do that. Distributed generation like solar is another way where we're able to see things, be able to respond with the grid to use it more effectively. With AMI, the question is, how does it work? A lot of different technologies out there. You can use cell phones, plug a cell phone into the meter, and it can call just like your cell phone does. Pretty expensive. You can use radios. You can send signals on power lines. You could hook it right up to the internet as another way of doing it. The system that Morganton's using for the pilot right now is called NextGrid, is the name of the company. They use a radio packet. The advantage of the radio packet is that it, the hills and terrains that you guys have here, it can still see around those. When you have the congestion that you do where neighbors are close to one another. When you get to a rural system, they tend to use signals on power lines, just a different way of communicating depending on the terrain. So the radio system, we think about it as a radio system, is actually using a combination of Wi-Fi and Zigbee. Zigbee is sort of like Wi-Fi. So we have Wi-Fi. I know I have it in my house, right? The internet comes into my house. I have a little Wi-Fi router so my kids can use it upstairs. So that type of Wi-Fi router, in this building we have Wi-Fi routers. We can see it on our cell phones. So this system uses something similar to that called Zigbee. Zigbee is, you can think about it as an AM radio compared to an FM radio. One's English and one's Spanish. They're just a different channel, different language. But technologically, they operate the same way. They're using radio waves at different frequencies to be able to communicate information. So the Wi-Fi can go a little bit further than Zigbee can. It's a stronger signal, so Zigbee is a weaker signal, which is good. It doesn't need that much of a push, partly because we're not sending a lot of data. With your phone, the data that you have to get to be able to push a voice through it is a lot. With a meter, all I want to know is how many, you used 168. So I need to send the number 168. That's a pretty small message. So it's a very small message. You don't need a big bandwidth. You're not sending video. So that's where Zigbee really shows up as a superior communication method at the house. This next grid system also uses Wi-Fi out on the road. This shows the how this works. So the green dots would be your meters. So the meters are all talking Zigbee, and they actually talk to each other. They say, hey, I just read 168, pass that on to the big node. And so the meters will bounce off of each other what they just read up to this collector. The collector is a Wi-Fi collector that's out on one of the poles. The Wi-Fi collector on the pole, then the Wi-Fi collectors all talk to one another and then push the information back, typically to the substation. Once it hits the substation, we get a router and we put it on the internet and push the data back to the office. So it's all done wirelessly. You don't have to build a separate communication system. Each meter's got a little Zigbee radio in it, and we put a handful of radios out on the power poles, and that's the entire system. Not only can we use that system for reading meters, you can also use it for other smart grid applications as well, for outage detection, capacitors, just other functionality that you would use to improve the operation of a system. So it also has all of these multiple paths. So if the meter's in the backyard and the pole's in the front yard, it's a line-of-sight communication. So I can talk to the house next door, that can talk to the house on the hill behind it, that can talk to the pole. So it's sort of that, bing, 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 like hitting a cue ball, right, on a pool table, and it bounces around and finally finds a pocket. So these radios, one of the things that NextGrid has is a proprietary communication system that makes sure that it has the optimal path, and it uses the optimal path at a low signal strength. Some systems start off where the meter shouts out, here I am, here's my number, and as really as loud as it can in hopes that somebody hears it. What NextGrid does is it starts off with a shout and turns it down to a whisper. It says, can you hear me? Okay, then I don't have to talk any louder than this, which means the signal strength is much lower. The power consumption is also lower. And that tuning takes place in about 2 minutes after you first plug the meter in. So this isn't something that has to happen over time. It happens very quickly. So lower signal strength, which is an important part of this system. So this radio is using wireless technology. AMI meters typically are pushing out at 100 milliwatts, which is like 1/10 of a watt. Think about a 60-watt light bulb. Very low. You're talking like a Christmas tree light. Very small amount of power on this. An AM radio station can generate out at 50,000 watts. Okay, now we're far away from that antenna, so we're not hit with 50,000 watts, but we're hit strong enough to be able to pick it up on an antenna. But again, it's a different level just to kind of get a feel for the transmission level that you would have coming out of there. These meters operate on a frequency that's 2.4 gigahertz in that range. A cordless phone that you might have in your house, if you still have phones in your house, we've all gone to cell phones, I think. But if you had a cordless phone in your house, cordless phones use the same unlicensed frequency band. Okay, so this is the same thing as those phones. So you have a base station in a phone, they're communicating via a radio that's operating either in the 900 megahertz or the 2.4 gigahertz, which are two signal ranges that the FCC has set aside as unlicensed for exactly this purpose, either walkie-talkies or cell phones or smart meters. And Zigbee technology that NextGrid is using that 2.4 gigahertz range. Essentially what they do is that my meter's set at 2.4 and my neighbor's meter is going to communicate at a channel of 2.41. And the next guy is at 2.42. So they're on very different frequencies, and that's how we can tell one from the other. And it's communicating a very small amount of data, so it's a little data pack. So it sends a signal out at 0.1 watts for a very short period of time. If I had a meter and was watching that could measure the strength, I would see the needle go up and almost drop back down immediately, just because the packet of data is very small. Just again to get a feel for the power level of a smart meter, this graph is shown in microwatts per squared centimeter. How much you would measure from that distance. So a cell phone up against your ear it's at 5,000 microwatts per centimeter squared. A microwave oven standing 2 feet away, when it's turned on, is 200. Okay, well within FCC limits and radiation limits, if you will. Smart meter being 3 feet away is just 2. A Wi-Fi router 3 feet away is 1. You know, one of the differences between the Wi-Fi router and the smart meter is the duration that it's on. My kids are on my Wi-Fi all the time, right? So it's hitting that frequency is being used all the time. The meters, the NextGrid meters, turn on for a short period of time, once every 15 minutes. And then you have a FM radio, and you have natural RF that's in the background that was normally seen if you put any kind of meter on there. And when you go to a smart meter and you're 10 feet away, again, the signal drops down. It's a squaring function, just like sitting around a campfire. When you're really close to the fire, it's really warm, but step back 4 feet and you can't feel it. And so that's kind of how this power levels that you see, it is a squaring factor. So what data does this meter read that's going to push out through this radio mesh network? Our primary goal is to read electric consumption or water consumption. Normally, at the end of the month, what I'm interested in, this is actually the graph on there, is the usage in a 24-hour period of a residential home. What I'm interested in is the area under the curve. Okay, that's the amount of energy that somebody's used, and we've agreed upon a price on a per kilowatt hour basis, and that's what I would bill them. With an AMI system, I can reproduce that graph. If you read it once a month, all you have is the area under the curve. You don't know where the highs and lows are. And the highs and lows are extremely important for managing the grid. I don't know, when I look at that graph, I can't tell when a hot water heater's on. I can't tell when a light bulb's on. I can't tell what someone's cooking for dinner. I just know how much energy they're using at that time. And that's the information that we're collecting. We also collect the voltage level at the meter. Is the voltage high or low? By standards, the voltage to the house is between 124 and 114 volts at the meter. We're making sure we're staying in there. We talked about loss of power. So if there's a power outage, that's a data point that we collect. And if there's meter tampering, that's another data point that's collected. There are alarms built in these meters. One of those alarms is a heat sensor. So if the meter gets hot for whatever reason, an alarm is set off and says, hey, I'm getting hot, you should come look at me. Your current meters don't have that, okay? We don't know if there's any issues with the meter, so the alarms are built into them. And then the meter identification number, there's a number associated with it, but it doesn't say, this is Kevin Mara's house, this is his street address. I don't broadcast that. That's not the data that I'm collecting. I just need the meter number. All of the personal information about the account is stored in the utilities computers. So they're matching that meter number up to the meter number that's assigned to my house. So all the personal information about me is stored in the utilities computer. Security of data. The radio packets where NextGrid is pushing that data out is encrypted. On a lot of Wi-Fi equipment, you have to have have the option to turn on encryption, so people can't come steal your data with this. NextGrid uses a very stringent protocol, and it's the NEST protocol. That's the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and it's FIPS 140-2. Very strict, and the military uses this. The military uses this to send encrypted data. NextGrid is the only AMI meter that has met this requirement and is currently used on military bases. None of the other meters currently meet this standard. So it shows they have a really high encryption level, a high security level. So the information that is broadcasted very secure. Physical aspects. As you can see in this picture, the older meters were metal and glass. Right? Our cars used to be metal. Right? So we're moving to fiberglass and plastic with our cars, and we're seeing the same thing with meters. Meters now, you can't buy a metal and glass meter. All new meters are plastic-based, whether it's AMI or not AMI. Now, the plastics used in that can withstand a great deal of heat by standards, and so that high heat helps provide some physical security in case there's any kind of hot spot in the meter. NextGrid's partnered with GE for a lot of their metering. The city is also experimenting with some vision meters. It's another manufacturer. So some of those are in play in this pilot project. But there's been no reported problems with those meters. There has been some reported problems from at least one manufacturer where the meter overheats and the plastic begins to melt and sometimes ignites. We haven't seen that with the GE in 10 years of service. Vision has 5 years of experience, and I'm not aware of any problems they've had either, but that's part of the pilot and evaluation process. The key to this, though, is the temperature alarm. If you have a temperature alarm and the utility is monitoring the temperature and reacting to those alarms, then that's a easy way of rectifying that. But it's also a manufacturer requirement that at certain temperatures this plastic should not ignite. And that's typical. If you think about your car engine, there's all sorts of plastics in our cars that can take the heat of the engine, and this is really no different. It's just using the right materials and the right application. So there's standards used by the industry for that. So to summarize some of the information that I've had, 33% of the residential homes in the U.S. are using AMI meters. The city is not right now thinking about or contemplating cutting-edge technology. You're looking at technology that has matured, has been vetted by a lot of different utilities, a lot of different public service commissions, and recommended by the federal government through that Smart Grid grant. So nothing new, nothing different. You're using technology already used. It's going to create a lot of benefits for the customers of the electric and water system in terms of reducing operating costs and providing more information to the customers about their usage and about reliability and about outages. We're in a information-rich technology. And having this here is going to provide that information not only to the utility to respond to it, but also to the customer. So it's really a two-way street from that. Typically, on the systems that I've looked at, you're looking at a 5-year payback period. when you just look at cost of meter reading and costs of truck rolls for disconnects and reconnects. But outage management, voltage reduction, restoration times, the ability to go to different rate structures, if that's what you want to do, prepaid, those are all options that you can do with meters that's hard to quantify from a price perspective when you're looking at payback periods. So just looking at payback, it's a pretty good investment, and by the way, you get a lot more for it as well. Those were the prepared statements that I had for you guys this afternoon, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that anyone on the council has.
Go ahead, Brian.
Kevin, you had talked about this as a mature technology. Are there any other technologies out there that are going to develop in the very near future? I guess my question is, with my cell phone, it seems like every 3 months a new cell phone, new technology comes out. Is this technology going to get any better than AMI?
We saw a movement from the AMR to the AMI. Most utility systems, one of their responses is they're amortizing it over a 15-year period, where we used to take those glass and metal meters and amortize them over a 30-year period. So by going to a shorter window on your amortization, then your payback would be done, but also in 15 years later, if you wanted to upgrade in technology, then that would be available. Most of the technology increases that I've witnessed has been in superior communication means, in terms of more data going back and forth. And what NextGrid has right now is a pretty strong platform in terms of bandwidth and bringing data back and forth.
Mr. Mayor, I guess my question would be in relation to the harmful effects of being exposed to smart meters.
Mm-hmm.
How harmful is the exposure to a smart meter? Let's say if you were in that zone that you talked about, the 3 feet zone, how harmful is that, for what period of time, and how harmful is it? And how harmful would it be if you were extended beyond the 3 feet from that smart meter?
Okay. It's a common question that's asked. The California Public Service Commission in 2011 had asked the California Council of Science and Technology, which is an independent science group in California that provides information to policymakers. So they're not a utility-based science and research group. They're a nonprofit independent group. And so they looked at, there's been a lot of talk about EMF for power lines back in the 90s. There's been a lot of research on EMF technology. And they reached a couple conclusions in their report that was released in 2011. One conclusion is that smart meters have a weaker signal than most household items. And two, with meters, there's referred to as thermal and non-thermal effects. With thermal effects, like in your microwave, right, you can go and put food in it and radiate it and it'll cook. When you have radio waves like this, it's possible to heat up cells in the human body. That's a thermal effect, and that is regulated by the FCC. And there's 2 levels of requirements put out by the FCC. One for a worker who knows he's going to go work around the antenna. So the thermal level, they cut that down. He can only be exposed to 10% of that. For a application for a non-worker like you and me with a meter on the side of a house, that goes down to 50% of that. So it's way less. So the thermal effects are really regulated by the FCC and are way below anything that we would see even if I was standing next to the meter 24 hours a day. So that thermal effect is regulated by the FCC, and these meters meet those requirements. The non-thermal effects is what we studied in the 90s, and some people continue to study them today, which is there a thermal effect from these frequencies on the human body. The California research that was done, and they didn't do tests, they read all of the hundreds and thousands of papers that have been done since the 90s on EMF, and came back and said there was no correlation between thermal effects of RF signals in the range that we're talking about in the human body. So there are no proven thermal effects associated with that, nor are there any pending legislations anywhere regarding trying to control the non-thermal effects. I think the short answer is, from those studies, I would say that it would be safe for the use of smart meters in residential homes. And I can share that study with you. And when the California study came out, there was 2 dissenting comments to that study. And then the state of Michigan was studying smart meters. And so they had 2 independent labs research those dissenting comments. And so there was also rebuttal on those 2 dissenting comments that also showed that the dissenting comments weren't based on proven scientific methodologies, and then therefore there were no harmful effects identified from RF of smart meters.
I'm trying to get a comparison as a homeowner as to what benefit. I know the outage, it would be a benefit to me because it'd be a little, quicker response time, even though our electrical department's pretty swift here. The cost versus the benefits that I would get.
I haven't been involved in any kind of cost-benefit study on Morganton's. I've been involved on them on other places. And right now, you pay meter readers to go out monthly, to go to everyone's house, face all those dogs and fences and all those hazards that come from reading meters. So you have to pay those people. I think you guys have 4 electric meter readers, and I forget how many guys doing it for water. That labor then would not be required. So there's a savings there because now we're doing it with technology. The other savings is that you have a lot of connects and reconnects. And so if I disconnect your service and you want it reconnected, you pay a fee. Typically, that fee doesn't cover the cost of that reconnect, especially if it's after hours, which means that if we're reconnecting my house because I was late paying and then finally showed up and made my payment, someone else is subsidizing me for that. And so with the smart grids, you're able to do all that remotely, and you can cut that cost down. And those are pretty expensive costs, and they're routinely, day after day, month after month, those kinds of truck rolls really add up from a cost perspective that affects everybody. The other part of having more information is the ability for the city to offer more rates, more varied rates that might fit one person's lifestyle while not another, where I could have time of use rates and I could adjust my lifestyle to turn my washing machine on late at night instead of during dinner hours when the peak occurs. And I could save energy that way. There's a lot of jurisdictions that are using that. We're looking at prepay could be another benefit that you couldn't do before. People who routinely have a hard time paying their bills and end up having to pay for connect and disconnect is very costly to them. If there's a prepay option, much like we do with gasoline, right? We prepay for our gasoline and then we drive. And with electricity, you use it and then pay for it. So prepay would allow you to pay for it in advance, and you could manage your cash flow and your electric usage that way. So it offers those kinds of benefits, I think, to the consumer when you have that in place.
Mr. Mayor, it appears that we're going to need a communication system. What I hear you saying, sort of a wireless unit that everybody connects, that is in addition to buying the meters. Would that be correct?
No, sir, it's not. Mr. Thompson, what they have is the meter itself, you plug a card in,
Okay.
And so we buy the meter with the card already in it. That's the radio.
Okay.
And so each meter comes with a built-in radio. There's the Wi-Fi collectors that typically go out on the pole. Wi-Fi collectors typically would collect 10 to 30 homes, so you don't need one for every home. That's the infrastructure that you're building. And it's not overly expensive compared to other types of communication.
Are all smart meters equal?
Are all smart meters equal? No, not, I would say not. I mean, that's part of the evaluation process. Morganton is using the assistance of Electric Cities to look at evaluation. Electric Cities started out looking at 40 different vendors, pared it down, I believe, to about 4 vendors, and had recommended different vendors for different geographic layouts. And that's why you do a pilot project.
Right.
To see that it works for your particular application.
Another question, and I'm not sure I understand, maybe you can help enlighten me, between a fixed grid system and a drive-by system.
A fixed grid system and a drive-by system. With early versions of the smart meters, what we did is we put a weak radio in the meter, and I put a receiver in a truck. And when I drove by your house, it read the meter. That's a drive-by system.
Okay.
And a fixed system would allow me then to just put this radio, the Zigbee radio, on, and I could read it from the office.
So
So
we're
that-
going
that-
to a fixed grid.
Yeah, you're going to a fixed grid system, and that's the difference between those two.
I had one more question or comment to make too. I understand that the ones that the city's using currently in the pilot program, it doesn't continuously send a signal. I understand that the one we're using in this pilot program sends like a 1 second signal, say every 15 minutes. Is that basically the way that most of the more recent smart meters are made, and is that the way they perform?
Most of the smart meters, Mr. Fleming, do packets of data on a either hourly or 15-minute basis, so that it's not constantly sending out a signal. And you know, part of that technology is it costs power to send out a signal. The utilities don't want to use that power because no one's buying it. It's a lost energy for them. So instead, we only turn it on when we need to broadcast the information. Now, the technology is also set up to say, if you want to move out, I can read your meter from the office by hitting a button, tell the meter, wake up, tell me what the reading is. So it could have read every 15 minutes, plus when I pulled it and asked it its information. So I can pull information from it more than every 15 minutes, but normally that's what it would do. And when it's on, it's like just a burst of information and then off. And again, the information packet that we're sending is relatively small, and so it doesn't take very long, so the signal's on for a very, very short period of time.
I asked that question because I'm interested in establishing, if I might, the exposure time that most people would have to their smart meter on a residence. So in looking at that, if that be the case, that it most likely would send a 1 second signal every 15 minutes, then we're talking basically exposure in the amount of 4 seconds an hour. So in order for a person to be exposed to it for a minute, then they would need to stand within 3 feet of their meter for a period of 15 hours in order just to be exposed for 1 minute. Now, with that being the case, and you've established or said that the exposure time is relatively harmless. So what are we looking at? No effect. A person has no effect, even though they worked around their smart meter for a period of hours, then we're talking about relatively no harmful effect to an individual. Is this the impression that I'm supposed to get?
Yes, sir, Mr. Fleming. As I said earlier, there's two types of effects that potentially you could get from a smart meter. One's a thermal effect, right, and that would actually heat up the cells in your body. That effect is regulated by the FCC. Exposure 24/7 to it, you will not exceed the FCC thermal rating. Okay, if it was on all the time, like the Wi-Fi unit in your house, if it was on all the time, you wouldn't exceed that level. Then the next level is the non-thermal effect. Now, the industry and World Health Organization have studied EMF really over the last 25 years in great depth, and has still not established any kind of link between non-thermal effects and any kind of health risks. That the fact that there are no links there says that the duration wouldn't matter. But even if there were weak links, okay, the duration then would make it even less if there was any kind of harm, which so far, the studies just aren't showing that there is in fact any harm. But the duration, you're right, is really short, and I think your example of 1 second is actually a little bit long. I think it's closer to a quarter of a second is what you would see in the broadcast time. So really, in an hour, you'd see a second of broadcast time. So it would take a long time to get, a full minute.
Thank you much.
But in most cases, the meters are outside the house. Makes a big difference also, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It does. It's not only that it's outside the house, but oftentimes away from the living quarters. And the antenna of the meter isn't pointing in your house, it's pointing away from your house, because I want to talk out to the other meters and out to the pole. So the broadcast of the signal isn't toward your house, it's away from your house.
Mayor, I think I just have one more question. I think, is there any circumstance where you would not recommend smart meters? I mean, I obviously know you're a proponent of them because it's saving money and it's technologically advanced, but can you think of any situation where you would not recommend a smart meter?
There's a minimum investment that you have to make for the communication piece. So very small communities. I've worked with some Alaska villages. When you're in a really small community, it doesn't make sense because of the investment with the collectors. But as your size of the population that you're putting these meters out, then that's where the savings begins to show up. I can't come up with another one that jumps out at me at the moment, but usually it's a financial question and how you do your communication. I've done some work in West Texas where it's 10 miles between homes, and again, communication gets really hard to do out there, even with power line carrier. And in that case, it doesn't work very well, but there's a big need for it at the same time just because of the distances to be able to go manually read it.
Anyone else? Kevin, what we can do is you'll stand to the side. We'll allow anyone in the audience to come up with a question, not a speech, but a question about the AMI meters, the smart meters.
Okay.
Okay?
Very good.
State your name and where you reside. Come, you got-
Yeah, why don't you step?
yeah. State your name and where you reside.
Dr. Aziz Omer, 101 Irvingdale Lane. I have a question about smart meters. Why are there 19-plus states with lawsuits regarding health concerns and other issues that this speaker has not brought up? And
Let's do one at a time.
Address your, yeah,
One at a time.
Mr. Mayor. Yeah.
I can't address any of the lawsuits that may be occurring in other jurisdictions. I can tell you that in my experience in looking at AMI, California, Texas, Michigan, Vermont, Maine, are some of the states that have looked very deeply into AMI and health effects of AMI. EPRI has looked into it. Lawrence Livermore Lab has looked into it, and there's a consensus with those jurisdictions and those scientific groups that there are no adverse health effects. That doesn't stop someone from litigating an opinion, but that's what I do know about.
my other questions are that, with the U.S. Department of Energy has stated that with a $1.5 trillion expenditure, they found this to be really a non-sustainable form of use of these smart meters, since we're really not going to use them in the way they were meant to be used, where it would be connected to your thermostats and everything.
That's the question.
That's the question.
The application of smart meters really goes back to the system that's using it. And we talked about prepaid, we talked about remote disconnect, we talked about outage management. Those are all options to use or not use. Not all utilities are using every one of those. Some are using all of them. Could you use it to control the thermostat? You could if you wanted to. You guys have a load management program now. It's an older legacy system. You can continue to use that, or you could use this new NextGrid system to be able to provide the communication means to apply to that load management and maybe expand it. But that's an option that's available. Whether or not you choose to use it is unique to your system and your application.
Up north, North Star Utilities found that this technology did not work for them with 3.2 million customers. How is it possible over a 2-year period that they were not able to see any benefit, in fact, a loss for each and every consumer, that how this could possibly work for a community as small as ours when we don't have enough of a population to justify the $8 to $10 million possibly before this said and done, where this technology could require a change, where the warranty for NextGrid is only 2 years at a full warranty at most. That's my question. How's that possible that that utility company with 3.2 million customers couldn't make it work, and how we're going to make it work for this town?
I think the economics are an important question in this. Right now, the city is conducting a pilot. And the pilot helps in the next step, which is going to be that economic analysis. And so I really have no knowledge as to where you're going or with that, but I don't think that economic analysis has been done yet, and I think that that's something to be considered in the future.
May I interrupt just
Sure.
to ask a clarifying question there to follow up on that with Mr. Mara? Are you aware of utilities, whether public or non-publicly owned, outside of Morganton, of comparable size that have brought in AMI projects?
Yes, I've helped several systems relatively same size or a little bit larger bring in AMI systems. Normally, we justify those on reduction of meter reading costs and remote disconnect costs. Those two things usually give you a 5-year payback period, and then the other benefits are sort of the icing on top of that technology. Normally, a system of this size, I think you could bring it in and still have it done cost effectively, but Each system has different set of costs, different set of circumstances.
Might I interject too? There's information at your places because we have provided some information with what's happening in North Carolina, which is a pretty good reference for us. If you take a look, you have 2 maps, and one of those details looks like this, and that details the Electricity's smart grid project, and those are the cities in North Carolina that are members of Electricities that are doing similar projects, either have or are doing them, and you have indicated by that the number of meters that they have in their systems. And that's just information for you to have. The second thing that you have is information, and it's another map, North Carolina, it's blue, has greens and blues and stuff. That is a map of all the North Carolina electric cooperatives, and there are 26 of those in the state of North Carolina. 19 of those are using some version of an AMI system, and the co-ops serve over 960,000 customers in North Carolina. And you have not broken down by individual, but you have the co-ops and the totals in what they are doing in North Carolina. The other information that you have is a sheet that looks like this, a lot of little lines and stuff on it, and that's some information from the listserv in North Carolina and some phone calls to folks who are doing this in the water business in North Carolina, and types of systems that they are using, types of meters, how long, are they just getting into it, that sort of thing. And you have some information, ranges anywhere from like a Greensboro that has 103,000 meters, Cary that has over 60,000, Brunswick County with 40,000 using this, all the way down to Newton that's installing 6,400. Conover's had 5,800 for 14 years in their water system in place. You've got Lincolnton just starting to look at some of this. So you have a sampling is what this represents and what people are considering.
Kevin, it's unique. I believe it was yesterday's newspaper. A gentleman lived in Florida. His home is, he owns a home up here in Burke County, and the water system used 90,000 gallons of water. I've had an experience like that, but not here. And it's amazing that nobody, they really can't tell you when it was used. You only know when you get the bill, whereas hopefully this would be something that you could catch it early.
That's correct. Because the meters are reading on a time interval, you would see no usage, and all of a sudden thousands of gallons. And you can set alarms in these systems to look for that kind of drastic change at a residence and say something must be leaking, something must be wrong.
Really only used normally 5,000 gallons a month,
Correct.
and it went to 90,000.
Yeah. So yes, these meters, especially on water systems, can really help with that type of residential leak detection.
Can each individual be a different alarm for each individual house? Could that be set up?
Yes, sir.
Because when my teenage girls were there, it went through a lot of water mail, I'll be honest with you.
I was going to say 5,000 wouldn't do it at my house.
Went through it pretty quick.
30-minute showers.
Yes.
So it's a question of programming that, but you would look for that anomaly piece and see where's the change. And at that point, you can dispatch somebody to look at it. You can call the customer. Any of those things can then be done. But otherwise, you're in the dark for that 90,000 until that once every 2 months.
And the general comments from the utility, because it's evidently standard, the Burke County comments, I noticed Brad gave comments to the newspaper were a little bit different, and I liked his comments better. Valdez gave their comments. Another water utility 4 hours from here gave the same as the county gave. I mean, it doesn't help you any. It's your tough luck. If you don't find, if there's not a leak on the utility side of the meter, it's your responsibility to pay it.
Been there, done that at my house, so I felt that pain before.
I've heard in Houston, Texas, there's been over 500 complaints by these same types of meters where voltage spikes and other concerns have caused failures of appliances where you turn that voltage down. So that is just one of the beginning of many other concerns.
The AMI meters are reading voltage, and whether you use that voltage to operate your system at a lower voltage to save energy, again, is an operational decision. The meters provide that tool, and then using that tool requires forethought as to what the implication would be. There's standards that say how low you can push the voltage down within a safe range, because that all appliances that are made to operate within 110 to 126 volts. So utilities are typically required to deliver no less than 114 to a house. And if I know what the voltage is at your house, then I can tune that voltage accordingly. And that's how those systems are working, and it reduces the customer's energy usage, which reduces the purchases made by the utility. So it's a win-win on both sides, and that's why it's been such a cost-effective program for public power.
And to be clear, we do, like most utilities, we do voltage
Today.
variations today with the analog meters that we have today.
Right, you're doing that today. You're probably taking spot readings to find out how far you can go, but being a utility, you're probably being conservative. And it probably could go further. You probably could save more money if you had these meters on that could tell you the real-time voltage.
But the meter itself merely provides the information to allow the utility to change the voltages. It doesn't itself control the voltage.
No, sir, it does not.
Has NextGrid been around for 15 to 20 years? Has it been around to show and guarantee reliability and safety from fires and anything else that we've read hundreds and hundreds of readings online? Should we trust NextGrid because you all decided that Electricities has decided that would be a good one to choose just because it's a utility company and the fact that the speaker is brought by the utility companies?
The AMI marries a meter with a communication card that's plugged in. The meter's proven technology. It's been around for a long time. Electronic meters have been here for 10, 15 years. So the meters is really a fixed commodity. Then the communication card that plugs into it is using Zigbee technology, which has really grown and has been in use for well over 15 years, much like Wi-Fi. So the communication is there. What Nextel brings is some protocols for encryption and protocols for managing the data packets between. But the communication is a type of communication that's been proven and been around for a while.
Mm-hmm.
The American Cancer Society said that these things can cause problems with pacemakers and insulin pumps and other prosthetic electronic devices. There's been no mention of anything like that or any opposition of any kind that even exists in any way or form.
I'm not aware of any type of communication issue between a smart grid meter and any other type of communication device. One of the things the FCC does by having this wireless, this unlicensed frequency, the 2.4 gigahertz, is it says nobody else ought to be on here, and if you do get on here, you need to have a weak signal so that you don't interfere with other components. So your other components like pacemakers and other devices are operating at a different frequency that helps prevent any kind of interference like that.
Okay, Kevin, think 1 second. we have other people in here that maybe would like to ask a question. Would you please come forward? Doctor, identify yourself and where you reside.
I am Dr. Umar, Dr. Syed Umar. I live at 107 Castlegate Drive, Morganton. Mr. Speaker, you are an engineer and I am a physician. You are well versed with the engineering part of the smart meter, but I have to protect and prevent certain things which these smart meters will cause. I have read a lot of material on the internet, and I would point to you in this regard the article by Dr. Sandra Palangiri in Global Research dated June 28, 2014, in which she says that she has personally seen the damage these dangerous meters have done. She uses the word dangerous meters have done to numerous people and several animals all across the USA. And there is another article by Daniel Hirsch, a California radiation expert and UC as the instructor. He said the radio frequency pulsations are 160 times stronger than a cell phone. At this time, I would like to ask you, number one question, do these smart electric meters produce any electromagnetic pulse? I repeat, any of these EMFs. Number two, does this EMS cause any damage or disease in human beings and damage to property? I would like you to answer these questions. I have this material over here if you want to read it. Smart meters produce 160 times more than cell phone. Thank you.
Radios, which is what we're operating with these meters, do emit a frequency. EMF is electromagnetic frequency, so they do emit an electromagnetic frequency. So there is a frequency, there is a radiation. The radiation is separated in ionizing and non-ionizing radiation. The non-ionizing radiations means that it's not going to separate electrons from your body like an X-ray will or gamma rays will. So we're down in the same frequency as an FM radio and AM radio. If you're exposed to it for long periods of time, it can actually heat up your body. And that's where the FCC sets up requirements that says you can't get that hot. And so there's power limits that you're limited to broadcast by. And so those limits have one limit for worker, and it's way less for the general public. So we're way below any kind of thermal effects from electric meters when we use these AMI meters. In terms of non-thermal effects, which is it causing cancer, is it doing other kinds of health concerns? The industry has studied this for 60 hertz frequencies, it's studied it for 900 hertz, it's studied it for this 2.4 gigahertz, really off and on for the last 25 years. And there has been no identified adverse health risks from those studies, both from utility groups. The World Health Organization has come to the same conclusion, so that's where we stand on that. There has been just had a question regarding an individual from California who had questioned the frequency of that, and those were one of the interveners in the California report, and those statements that he made were refuted by I'm trying to remember if it was EPRI or Lawrence Livermore Labs, but I do have that report that had discussed some of his comments and a scientific rebuttal of those comments, if you're interested.
Anyone else in the audience?
I just have one comment. I don't have to go there.
No,
No, you got,
Got to come up.
you need,
Ms. Omar, you have to come up front, I'm sorry. That's all right. That's okay.
It says that you want to reduce the cost of the labor. As it is, we have very high unemployment rate in Morganton. So that's what my comment is. Why do you want to reduce more people?
Anyone else would like to?
I think we need to address that. Reducing.
State your name, where you reside.
Mr. Garrison, 105 Kimberly Drive here in Morganton. I would just be curious to know if the gentleman that has been invited by the city today has ever not recommended smart meter technology in the years that he has been an expert or has advised communities on this technology.
In the early versions of it, in the 90s, costs were higher. There was less information coming back. And I had recommended some of my clients in the 90s to delay until the technology had matured. In my work in the District of Columbia, looking at Potomac Edison's filing for smart meters, we looked really hard at their cost-benefit analysis. Well, I took exception to some of their cost-benefit analysis, but yet even with those exceptions, it still had a good payback period, and it was eventually approved by the Public Service Commission.
Anyone else? Members of the council, do you have any questions?
Got one more question,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Mayor. Can we fine tune the cost of this a little bit closer? Now, I've heard $3.5 million, $4 million, $8 million, and tonight, or this afternoon, $10 million. Pretty big gap. What are we talking about implementing this?
Well, I will confess that I know nothing about the cost of your particular system. And so I would be really just winging it on cost, so I don't think I'm really the one to answer that question. The goal of the pilot project was to see that the technology worked. Will these radios communicate from house to house with the hills that you have? Put it out in December when the leaves in the trees grow, that affects those kinds of radio signals. Will it still communicate well? And if the answer is yes, then I would expect the city would do a much more detailed cost analysis on that and come back to the council with a clear number. But there's no sense doing that if you don't know if it works, and that's what a pilot is really about.
Absolutely, because that's going to help us determine the design, really, and how many of the communications devices and all do you need? Do you need that to be more dense in order to get the communications? Can you stretch that out? And so that will come back to you if the pilot proves that it's going to work and there seems to be value in having it. So that number really, I know you've heard a lot of numbers thrown out today by several people, but you haven't heard a number thrown out by the people who are working with it for the city because we don't know it.
John, you missed a little bit of, or some of his dissertation. Do you have any questions you want to ask? You all right?
I'm okay.
Okay. Okay. Kevin, you're a good teacher.
Thank you,
You
Mr.
have
Mayor.
Ask Roy if he has anything to
Who?
say. Roy.
Roy, do you have anything to say?
No, sir. Just appreciate you allowing us to come today and
Well,
speak.
I mean, I would love to have had a college course under you as a professor, because the way you explain things and in an even keel, you do it in simple terms that anybody can understand. And we greatly appreciate your trip here, and it was a beautiful day. And you can go back home and rest well that you made a good presentation.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity to
Dr.
come
Homer, has
talk
he
to you.
got any more questions?
No.
No.
Thank you a lot. All right, we will end the workshop. We'll just simply adjourn this call meeting, and we will come back at 5:30 for our public comment time.